Hello dear students, I welcome you. The topic for today's lecture is Development Administration in India. In this lecture, we will try to understand the meaning of development administration, evolution of development administration in pre- and post-independent India, and last but not the least, to understand the significant measures that led to the growth of development administration in India. Dear students, literally and a very basic understanding of development administration involves breaking it down into two different concepts, that is, development and administration. Most lucid delineation of the term development would mean a change, a progressive change, a state of affair that would characterize advancement towards fruition. Such change is bound to be both inward as well as outward, vertical as well as horizontal, characteristic of both individuals as well as their collective representation, formal or informal. According to the world famous Indian economist and Nobel Prize winner Amartya Sen, and I quote, "Development is a tool enabling people to reach the highest level of their ability through granting freedom of action, that is, freedom of economic, social and family actions, etc." Unquote. If we analyze the definition proposed by Amartya Sen, it highlights economic and social aspects of development. And once both of these domains are accomplished, it concomitantly paves way for political development as well. Some of the major determinants that contribute significantly towards economic development would include human resources management, infrastructure development, efficient and scientific utilization of natural resources, healthy population growth, information technology advancement, so on and so forth. The indispensability of development lies on its focus not merely on the economic dimension, but a genuine development is much more than a matter of economics and economic development. Development is essentially about change, not just any change but a definite improvement, a change for better. Simultaneously, development also emphasizes upon continuity and also taking into consideration various measures for the sustenance of such continuity. It is what we call as work in progress, and there is no limit, no constraint, no finite persuasion. Rather, development is an infinite as infinity. No matter how much focus is established towards change, but there are certain traits or symbolic affiliations associated with a society or a community that might need to be kept as they are or subject to a gradual or a small change, like traditions or values associated with a culture, more particularly traditional or orthodox cultures. Therefore, development must be a combination of first, a change, an efficacious change, and secondly, a constant or a disposition not determined by too much change. However, terms and conditions apply in case of the latter. So, in order to put a period to the explanation of the term development, it has to be holistically appropriate, that means culturally, socially, economically, technologically and environmentally. So, it won't be inapt to insinuate that development is a multi-stratified process and not a one-dimensional persuasion, and in such pursuit, it's the people or the human beings that are the principal focus. That is what is known as a humanistic approach to development. On the other hand, there is the term administration. The word administration does not have a univocal, lucid or simple meaning. No doubt, the fundamental composition of the term administration has to be more or less same across all cultures and operational paradigms. But there are certain what can be called as dispensable or not so fundamental constituents that are subject to variation or change. In order to understand the former component, that is, the common denomination associated with the term administration, let's understand the term by taking into consideration some of the basic definitions of administration. F.M. Marx says, and I quote, "Administration is a determined action taken in pursuit of a conscious purpose. It is the systematic ordering of affairs and the calculated use of resources aimed at making those things happen which one wants to happen and foretelling everything to the contrary." Unquote. Likewise, and very much in synchronization with the definition put forth by F.M. Marx, Ordway Teard points out that, and I quote, "Administration is a variety of component elements which, together in action, produce the result of a defined task done. Administration primarily is the direction of people in association to achieve some goal temporarily shared. It is the inclusive process of integrating human efforts so that a desired result is obtained. Administration is the central powerhouse of the motivational impulsion and spirit which makes the institution drive to fulfill its purpose." Unquote. Technically speaking, as per the Law Dictionary, administration means the practical management and direction of the executive department or the public machinery or functions or of the operations of the various organs of the sovereign. In many aspects, administration is not much different from management. In fact, lot many use the two terms interchangeably. No surprise that resemblance between, for example, books of history of administration and history of management are plentiful, but the references of the other, or more specifically cross-referencing between management and administration, is rare. So we have to remember that whenever and wherever both management and administration might look very much similar, fact of the matter is they just are not. Administration is a broader term which may or may not include management. However, it's always preferable to have it in the armory of a more effective administration. Now, as we have covered almost all the fundamental and also the relevant aspects of development administration, it therefore becomes much easier to understand precisely what development administration in real and technical sense actually means, and also the evolution and metamorphosis the term underwent over the period of time. If we rewind the clocks back to the time of colonialism, there was a lot of visible asymmetry between the colonial powers, or what can also be called as imperialist, and their colonies in most of the aspects, primarily socially, economically, as well as politically. It was exclusively some of the major imperialist powers like the Britain, France, Italy, Spain, Holland, Germany, and lot many other countries in Europe, and also non-European countries like USA, Australia, etc., that had experienced development, more specifically across their political and economic dimensions, primarily due to the much anticipated period of Renaissance and the ensuing Industrial Revolution. Even after the almost ubiquitous decolonization, largely across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, something that simultaneously marked the end of the Second World War, the newly formed post-colonial states like India, for example, were caught off guard and wanting due to a number of national issues like poverty, hunger, unemployment, gender inequality, illiteracy, ethnic, sectarian, and racial tensions, and not to forget the near to bottom per capita income of a country that had an overwhelming population rising exponentially. The new sovereign and independent status gave promise of freedom and liberty, and most importantly, self-determination in political systems of mostly representative democracy. For such countries like India and others alike, it was not to be merely an administrative overhauling, but much more than that was the need of the hour, something that had to be led by development administration. So that was the time when the term development administration came into a pragmatic and frequent use, more specifically during 1950s, to represent those aspects of public administration and those changes in public administration that are needed to carry out policies, projects and programs to improve social and economic conditions. Development administration is a change-driven, positive and moving perspective which is functional for bringing socio-economic change in society. In order to better understand development administration, one has also get to know the expert opinion, and here are some of the definitions that enlighten our perspective in this regard. According to Edward Wietner, development administration is, and I quote, action-oriented, goal-oriented administrative system guiding an organization towards the achievement of progressive political, economic and social activities, unquote. John Montgomery has defined it as, and I quote, carrying out planned change in the economy, in agricultural industry or capital infrastructure, supporting either of those, and to a lesser extent in the social services of the state, especially education and public health, unquote. Fredericks has defined development administration as, and I quote, organized efforts to carry out programs or projects thought by those involved to serve developmental objectives, unquote. Dear students, let's now focus on the development administration in pre- and post-independent India. In a way, it was simple to persuade development administration in the third world or the post-colonial countries, as they just had to follow what the already developed countries had done. There already was a mirror image, the experience of others, that would form the basis of development administration. But in a country as complex as India, due to its very diversified cultural, religious, social, political and even linguistic complexities, it was much more than that. So, it won't be inapt to say that the development administration has a contextual existence as well as more relative sustenance. That is the best or the complex part of it. Development administration focuses to develop the activity of government to bring a change, especially in achieving the progressive objectives in the social, economic and political fields. Development administration put forward any social or political system and structure on the path of development. It's also concerned with well-organized, integrated and directed efforts of national government to bring about socio-economic progress, welfare and well-being of people at large. Other than the aforementioned issues, India at that time still had more or less a semi-feudal social structure, meaning thereby the concentration of wealth was in a fewer hands, dividing the absolute majority of even a marginal economic status. The need of the hour was to put the nation on the rails of development for the benefit of all. To begin with, the process of planned change was ushered into both for meeting the challenges as well as the planned change. India adopted the strategy of planned change, which implied, among other things, that planning was to be the basic strategy of social reconstruction. Planning was to be used as an instrument of socio-economic progress and nation building. It was recognized as central to the societies where public sector has to play a role of commanding heights in the economy so as to fulfill the expectations and aspirations of the people. Thus, planning was regarded as a conscious effort to achieve the desired objectives. It is pertinent to mention here that for India, the process of cognition vis-a-vis development administration had started way before independence. However, whether such enterprise was advertent or inadvertent, well, that's a secondary question. It was way before 1947. To be absolutely specific, in the year 1936, Dr. M. Visvesvaraya had underscored the need for planning for industrialization of the country. He had suggested a 60-member advisory board from different social sections and interests for the purpose of plan formulation and execution. He had also recommended the setting up of a planning commission responsible for day-to-day administration and a development department at the center and economic councils in the provinces. It was not merely at an individual level that such initiatives were taken on board, rather also at the institutional level. In fact, it was the collective or the institutional level intervention that was more effective and result oriented, but that does not mean individual contribution was not important. As a matter of fact, it was the individual intervention that laid the seeds for institutional course of action. India's undisputed political party, Indian National Congress, that was founded way back in 1885 by a British political reformer, Alan Octavian Hume, played a significant role in this regard. Congress, after assuming power in the provinces in 1937, recommended the establishment of an expert body for evolving schemes for national reconstruction and planning. As a result of it, in 1944, Planning Committee under the chairmanship of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who was the first Prime Minister of India, it published 3 plans: the Bombay Plan, the Gandhi Plan and the People's Plan. A planning and advisory board was formed in 1946. The major aim of these efforts was to bring about rapid improvement in the living standards of the people. So one very important denouement that has emerged in the forefront so far is that it was not only the outside European or American model of development administration that was copied and put into practical implementation, but even prior to that, there was a significant indigenous measures and initiatives taken into consideration that had both scientific as well as unmethodical association. Now, dear students, after independence of India, efforts were made to bring forth development and to fulfill basic needs of all concerned in accordance with the spirit of the Constitution through planned moves. It is pertinent to mention here that though there are a lot of institutions and initiatives that have given development administration its practical shape in India, but it won't be possible literally to cover each and everything here. So only 3 most quintessential measures have been taken on board, which are Planning Commission, land reforms and democratic decentralization. Let's first discuss Planning Commission. For the formulation, implementation and administration of plans, the Central Cabinet adopted a resolution on March 15, 1950 to set up the Planning Commission. What is the most landmark contribution of the Planning Commission was the development, execution and monitoring of the 5-year plans, an idea that had a significant emulation from the erstwhile Soviet Union model under the leadership of Joseph Stalin. All the way since 1951, a total of 12 5-year plans have been introduced, and eventually in the year 2014, when Bharatiya Janata Party, the spearhead of the National Democratic Alliance, came into power and dissolved the Planning Commission and replaced it with a new developmental program, Niti Aayog, which means National Institution for Transforming. The Planning Commission, being a composite organization, gives collective advice on its important matters. The Planning Commission performs a variety of functions covering the entire economy of the nation. The functions of Planning Commission are assessment of resources, formulation of plan, determination of priorities, augmenting of scarce resources, monitoring and evaluation of plans. Now, dear students, let's talk about the Program Evaluation Organization, that is PEO. Under the general guidance and direction of Planning Commission, the Program Evaluation Organization was created in 1952 for evaluating the Community Development Program and Intensive Area Development Scheme. Later on, its sphere of operation was enhanced, including therein the evaluation study of plans, programs and cooperation, health, family welfare, rural industries, rural development, public distribution, etc. Another agency concerned with the formulation of developmental planning and policies is the National Development Council. The importance of the council lies in the fact that it has been largely responsible for giving Indian plan a national character and for ensuring national unanimity in approach and uniformity in working. The major thrust of overall planning was to evolve strategies to at least minimize the problems being faced by the people at large. In order to have self-reliant economy, such thrust areas were picked up where state intervention is required. Keeping in view the vital and crucial role to be played by public sector in industrialization and modernization, the state monopolized in the areas of atomic energy, defense, railways, airways, iron and steel, minerals, coal, shipbuilding, aircraft, electricity, etc. To cope up with the problems of unemployment, underemployment and disguised employment, the state has taken good number of measures. Some schemes like Jawahar Rozgar Yojana, National Rural Employment Program, Rural Labor Employment, etc., along with the employment opportunities being provided in the public sector undertakings are landmarks in this regard. Now, my dear students, let's discuss the land reforms in post-independent India. India is predominantly an agrarian society, an unwavering status that has been there ever since eternity. At that juncture of time, that is post-independence, the agricultural production was marred by multiple factors like the old and exploitative land and revenue legislations that were very beneficial for the sustenance of British rule in India, and also lack of technological intervention when it came to agriculture, something that later gave rise to what came to be known as Green Revolution. So land reformation was one of the key factors that formed the basis of development administration in India due to its highly determining nature. As already mentioned above, one of the major problems before the country at the time of independence was unequal concentration of land ownership in the hands of few and prevailing conditions of semi-feudalism. As stated earlier, the country had a semi-feudalistic structure of society, having wealth concentration in few hands. To do away with this unequal distribution of wealth, the poverty elevation became the priority item on the national agenda. It was believed to be achieved through land reforms on a quantitative and qualitative scale. The land reforms objectives were sought to be achieved through the following measures. First, abolition of zamindari system, tenancy reforms, imposition of land ceiling and redistribution of surplus land, and finally, the consolidation of land holdings. Now, my dear students, let's discuss the democratic decentralization in post-independent India. Decentralization is a process that challenges the monopoly of the centralized government for the most effective operationalization of the governments all across the world. A centralized government has very lesser or no connections with its constituent states or further lesser representations like panchayat or a municipal territory. In case of a centralized socio-political structure, the representation from various states or other lesser constituents is either unheeded or not taken that seriously, thus ignoring the home advantage that has the potential to offer the most educated and resourceful information. Amongst all decentralized socio-political structures, it's the panchayat that is considered as the most effective means of governance. So let's understand the evolution and the role of panchayats in India from the perspective of its contribution towards development administration. The Panchayati Raj system in India was a product of the assessment of the progress or failure of the community development program in the country by Balwant Rai Mehta Committee report on the program. Owing to the Gandhian approach to development and administration, the Panchayati Raj system was set up in India. Besides, the assessment of the success or unsuccess of the community development program also added to the factors responsible for the emergence of Panchayat Raj system. Through this system, it was sought to achieve a prosperous, genuinely democratic and dynamic India. Panchayati Raj system, introduced in 1959, had some important objectives like decentralization, participation in development administration, replacement of vested interest with the widening mass involvement in the task of establishing a genuine socio-political and economic democracy, linking taxes with benefits, planning from below, increasing the agriculture production and productivity, and involvement of the poor, weaker sections in the development process. Besides, some other objectives of the Panchayat Raj system as delineated in the third 5-year plan are development of rural industries, fostering cooperative institutions, encouraging the spirit of self-help within the village community, and progressive dispersal of authority and initiative with emphasis on the role of voluntary organization. Besides all these important objectives, panchayats also provide representations to the downtrodden sections within the society like women, scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in order to bring about an equitable development in the country. So dear students, I hope you have gained some important information from this lecture. We will meet soon with another lecture. Till then, take care and goodbye.